right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever you happen to be in the world today. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to attend this latest Head Nerd Bootcamp session. Cracking the code to lead gen. This is part 2. I delivered part 1 last week. It was really focusing on the marketing end of things when it comes to lead gen. We talked about how to build a digital marketing strategy and kind of the top things to be thinking about as you're building that strategy. And now with part 2, we're still talking about lead gen, but I like to think of it as kind of the other side of the coin, where we're talking about how do you build a telesales strategy or like a sales development representative strategy, like an SDR or a BDR, like a business development strategy. But either way, putting that motion in place at your MSP where you have someone proactively reaching out and calling into your prospects, trying to book appointments for you. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So if you haven't attended any of my boot camps in the past, my name is Stephanie Hammond. I am the head nerd that focuses on all things sales and marketing related here at Enable. Been with Enable for a little while, going to celebrate my 20-year anniversary in November. You can see my contact information there on the screen, my email address. I'm on LinkedIn, so if you're on LinkedIn, we should be linked together. Just a couple of housekeeping kind of reminders. I just have everybody on mute. That's just to maintain call quality. But if you're having any audio video issues or any questions as as I'm going through the boot camp today, put them into the question panel and I will do my best to answer as many of them as I can. If for some reason I'm not able to answer your question live, do know that I do commit to getting a response back to you by end of day tomorrow. This session is being recorded, and the reason being is I did a lot of updates to it since the last time I delivered it. Updated a lot of the scripting because I've had some good conversations recently with some business development managers that really specialize in this, so I've kind of took their feedback and incorporated in. So this session for a lot of pieces is pretty much brand new. So it is being recorded, and then I'll get it into our marketing department. They'll get it edited, they'll get it cleaned up, and then it will be uploaded into Enable University, and then the old one will be brought down. But that will be probably maybe a 3-week process. So if there's anyone that wants to, just get access to this raw recording before marketing gets their editing into it, just let me know, and I can send you just this raw recording as well. All right, so if you did attend last week's session, you would have seen this slide. You would have heard me say that net new customer acquisition continues to be the top challenge facing MSPs today. And you would have seen this slide as well. This comes from our MSPs Horizons report that really kind of backs that up. We did a survey last fall in conjunction with Canalys research firm, and they found that 22%, so I kind of rounded it up, almost 1 in 4 MSPs cited that new customer acquisition continues to be their top business challenge that they're dealing with. And in last week's boot camp, 50% of the people that attended the boot camp actually, they agreed with that statement, that they are challenged with new customer acquisition for their MSP. But if you didn't attend last week's session, I'm pretty sure that doesn't surprise you. MSPs are continually challenged, and really any business is challenged with finding new leads and net new customers for their organization. And as I, talk to partners and work with partners, kind of over the years, and I ask them about, what are their current sales and marketing motions that they have in place today to find new clients, a lot of times they'll cite that their main source of lead gen has really been through word of mouth and referrals. But as I mentioned last week, relying on referrals as your main source of lead gen, not really a sustainable way to kind of meet your company's growth objectives year over year. So referrals are wonderful. We love referrals, but we really do want to look at them as a bonus, not a de facto company growth strategy. And so looking at why I think MSPs are really struggling and that they're facing this challenge, again, I think it comes down to 2 key factors, just with all my conversations that I've had with MSPs over the years. And I think the big one is they're just really lacking that cohesive marketing strategy. And that's what we attempted to tackle last week. But even, a larger problem is with a lot of MSPs, they don't even have anybody really tasked to doing the basic marketing functions that are needed to find new leads. And it could be, they just don't have, that person. And if you're the business owner, you're already wearing, enough hats. So you're just probably really busy just working in the business every day. So if you're busy dealing with, tech issues and customers and employees, there's probably not a whole lot of time left to deal with the marketing aspect. So it's probably not as high up on your priority list as maybe some of the other activities that you need to work on as a business owner. And so if you're trying to do marketing, it's probably done more on an ad hoc, inconsistent type of basis, which makes sense. And so that's why last week's session, I really tried to kind of put together kind of like an 8-step plan to really help you, just get the marketing basics in place if you're not doing anything today in terms of marketing. But I think the second key factor in speaking to MSPs is they are lacking the proper sales structure around their sales motions to help them find new leads for their MSP. So if they're doing the marketing, which is fantastic, they tend not to be doing very well when it comes to actioning a lot of the marketing generated leads that come into the organization. The leads, they're not being followed up on in a timely manner. And so the lead goes cold and then they end up falling through the cracks, or they're lacking the ability altogether to, really proactively go out and create leads on their own to supplement their marketing activities to kind of help fill that marketing funnel. So again, I really look at today's boot camp as really being the sister boot camp to last week's session, but we're just looking at the other side of the coin that we call lead gen, because while implementing a proper and systematic marketing plan is fundamental in helping to, generate awareness, create interest in your organization, I think for real growth, you're also going to want to tie in a proactive outbound telemarketing sales motion as well. So looking at, what I want you to walk away with today, I want to focus on lead gen again, just, focusing beyond referrals and word of mouth, and really talk about how can you build and implement a successful telesales, cold calling, appointment setting, like whatever term we want to give to it within your organization, if you don't have one in place today. Or maybe you do have one. Maybe you do have an appointment setter, you have an SDR, a BDR, again, whatever name we give them, but you're not really getting the results that you're hoping for. And so in today's session, we're going to review, if you don't have a telemarketer appointment setter in place, then where and how do you get started with that? And then once you've hired a telemarketer, sales development representative, SDR or BDR, you're probably going to hear me use SDR and BDR probably pretty interchangeably in today's session. We call them SDRs here at Enable, so I'll probably just default to SDR. But once you have hired your SDR, then how do you go out building and implementing a training program for them so that you can properly set them up for cold calling success? And so to help with that training aspect, we're going to talk about, different, business to business appointment setting techniques so that you can help your SDR overcome, probably their biggest challenges that they're likely going to experience in the role. And that's really, how do they set up great appointments with qualified decision makers so that your pipeline is continually being replenished with new prospects and new opportunities. Because great appointments with qualified decision makers, that's going to lead to much better sales success, and it's going to help you build a better book of business for your MSP. And if you've ever attended any of my boot camps in the past, I'm all about helping MSPs build a better book of business for their MSP. So we're going to be reviewing techniques to help your SDR get past the gatekeeper. We're going to be talking about objection management techniques. I'm going to be giving a whole lot of scripting on different responses that you can give to really help your SDR overcome, the most common objections that they're likely going to hear as they, start engaging with decision makers. And then lastly, we are going to review kind of how to set milestones, expectations for your SDR, and what KPIs you may want to track to help you meet your desired goals and objectives. So really, for a lot of MSP sales, it typically does start with that first appointment. right? So we're going to use today's session to really discuss how do you build a structure to help you land more first appointments, and how we can help your SDR become a better appointment setter in the process. So, should you invest in hiring a cold caller for your organization if you don't have one in place today? That's kind of a trick question, because the short answer is yes, because why would I build a whole boot camp around it, right? So yes, if you don't have this function in your MSP today, maybe you're working with a third-party agency, that's fine, or maybe you have an in-house employee, that works too. You should have someone in this role to support and augment your marketing lead gen activities that you might be doing. But I know I always hear the hesitation when speaking to MSPs. There's a lot of MSPs that are out there that feel that cold calling, telemarketing is really a thing of the past, especially as we're dealing with this age of social media and online marketing. And so many aren't using it within their business. And I can appreciate that you might be sitting there, listening to me talk today and thinking, Steph, we've been there, we've done that, we have all the t-shirts. We tried hiring a cold caller a couple of times, it just never worked out. They just didn't do anything to help generate leads for our sales team. You might be thinking that. But this old school technique has worked and continues to work really well for a lot of organizations. Many of our top MSPs, they do have an SDR motion in-house. Here at Enable, we have a whole department. I think we have 25 people globally now dedicated to the function here at Enable. And we've had an SDR motion for years at Enable. I've been with Enable for 20 years, and there was already 4, we called them inside salespeople at the time, but we had 4 inside salespeople back in 2004 when I first started. And so it has done a lot, and it's a backbone of how Enable gets a lot of our new customers here. Because the benefits of having a cold caller really helps to commercialize your other marketing activities, like your social media activities, like your marketing activities. Because when we look at those are all passive outbound marketing activities, really designed to help build, virtual relationships with your audience in a virtual world. But you need the role of the SDR to do all of that proactive legwork of attempting to connect with your virtual audiences so you can turn those prospects into leads, real people who are going to want to meet with you. So my hope during today's boot camp is, if you're kind of on the fence about, the whole SDR motion, to convince you not to give up on that idea. Cold calling, the SDR motion is important, and it is necessary, and it can work, and it can work well if you have the right structure and the right activities in place, which is what I'm hoping to get through today. Because if you have attempted to hire and bring in a cold caller in the past and it didn't work, if you're kind of, in that camp, hopefully today's session will provide some insights, some tips, and hopefully get you to maybe reconsider that role. Because it is important to kind of separate the role and the need for having an SDR from the person actually doing the job. Kind of the role itself, very important in helping you to grow your business. I think the challenge really comes to trying to find that right person, to take on that role and to be successful in that role. And there's no easy button for it. It is a challenge. The top MSPs that I speak with, that help me in kind of writing this boot camp and then rewriting this boot camp, they will admit that they cycle through cold callers quite regularly, because there's really just a certain type of person that's going to be a good fit. And so the key is really to try and find that person, but then also have a good structure in place to train them. But also, you kind of got to be quick to recognize if it's not working and cut ties and let them go. So that's why we're going to talk about expectations and setting milestones to kind of help you with that decision. So cold calling motion can work if it's implemented correctly. Okay, so this next slide, I brought this up in last week's boot camp. We went through it. This is the marketing and sales funnel. I think everyone is familiar with that. And what it does is it really outlines the buying journey that the customer takes from being a suspect, where the company doesn't know you at all, doesn't know you exist, all the way down to a paying customer where they become kind of a loyal advocate and hopefully a raving fan. And I'm bringing it up again today because we're still talking about lead gen and how to create, kind of high quality leads for your marketing funnel, but we're just leveraging the sales motion this time to help you augment the marketing side of things. Because all the marketing in the world is not going to help fill the funnel if there's no one on the sales side proactively reaching out to engage with those prospects. But your cold calling motion would benefit immensely from having that consistent and systematic marketing strategy in place to help build interest and awareness in the marketplace about your company. So both motions, the marketing motion and the cold calling sales motion, are needed, again, if we really do want to grow our MSP, take it to that next level, and don't have such a heavy reliance on word of mouth and referrals. So the first big decision that you need to make, if this is something that you don't have today, but you're thinking of bringing it in, is, do I outsource this activity to a third-party company, like a third-party agency, or do I hire internally and bring someone in-house and make them an employee of an organization and just build them into our sales team? A lot of benefits to outsourcing. I have them listed here. Honestly, though, every partner that I've ever worked with hasn't found good success in using an outside agency. So if any of you on the line today are using an outside agency and you're having good success, I would love to get that feedback, because I don't think I've spoken with anybody that has really good success with using an outside agency. And so they might have started with an outside agency, they learned a few things, but then they ended up bringing that function in-house instead, and they ended up, hiring their own SDR, their BDR, and bringing that sales motion in-house. And I was just speaking with an MSP last week about this very topic, and he basically summed up his experience working with third-party business development agencies like this. I think he said he worked with 4 or 5 different agencies over the last couple of years trying to find someone to help his team. And he said they pretty much produced all lackluster results, despite the promises that they made to him. They didn't produce, what he referred to as the SQLs, the sales qualified leads that they were promised. What he said outside agencies could do is they're pretty good at developing marketing qualified leads, so MQLs for them, which was fine, but they wanted sales ready leads and they didn't get those from their biz dev agencies that they worked with. But the leads that they did get, they ended up putting it into their marketing system. They were nurtured, through their, their regular marketing activities, and they got warmed up, after a period of time to a point where they were sales ready, and then their BDRs were able to action them. But out of the gate, sales ready leads, nah, he said that he didn't get anything like that. And so for MSPs that are having success, they ultimately all brought it in-house. They just went and hired their own SDR, and that's really what the remainder of this boot camp is going to be about. It's going to be assuming that you're going to bring the SDR function in-house. And so we're going to talk about what do you need to do to kind of spin up that telemarketing function and get your SDR trained. And that's really the key to this boot camp. So just to play devil's advocate here, if there is anyone on the line and, you had that appointment setter before, it didn't work out, or if you have one now and it's not really producing the results that you're looking for, the question I want to ask you is, what sort of training program do you have in place, or did you have in place to help ensure that your appointment setter, your SDR, is successful in their role? Do you have something that's structured and well documented? Or is it something that's more ad hoc and kind of done on the fly? And then as they progressed in their role, what sort of regular ongoing training and coaching are you providing? Because really training is everything when it comes to the successful implementation of a telesales motion. We need to treat this just like any other role in the organization. Like if you've gone and hired, recent grads and kind of handed them a list of companies and a phone and said, go drum up sales and go get some business for us, and that was the extent of your training program, then you shouldn't be at all surprised when it didn't really pan out the way you wanted it to. So we're going to talk about how do you create that framework for your BDR so that they are successful for you and generate leads for you. So the two most important things that you're going to want to equip your appointment setter with to help aid in their success is cold call lists and cold call scripts. So we're going to look at task one. How do you go about building a comprehensive cold call list of prospect names for your appointment setter to call into? So this was really a big crutch of what we talked about last week, because you can't build an effective cold call list if you don't know who it is that you want to have as customers. And so last week's lead gen bootcamp that was focused on marketing, we spoke about how do you create your ideal client profile, that ICP, and then how do you use that ideal client profile to create kind of your MSP customer dream list, the list of businesses that you would love to have as clients someday. And this is really important, that your appointment setter, your SDR, has a clear understanding and a definition around who your ICP is, who's your ideal client, and what are the target verticals that you want them to pursue. As an example, if your target vertical is professional services, you want to ensure that your trainee has a very clear definition around what do you mean by the term professional services. And what industries do you specifically want to target? Because professional services, as we all know, that's kind of that umbrella term, right? You can't assume, though, that your trainee understands what you mean by that. And I bring this point up because this came from an actual conversation that I had with a partner when I was initially developing this boot camp. And we were discussing his challenges that he was experiencing, with their internal cold caller that they had just hired. And he was looking for my opinion around whether they should let him go or should they keep investing in him and let him stay on. Because in his mind, the cold caller, their SDR, had been around for 3 months and hadn't really produced any tangible leads for their sales team. So he's like, do I keep him or do I let him go? So that was one of the first things I asked him. I said, what kind of training did you provide this individual when you brought them on? And he was good on him to admit that, yeah, he didn't really provide them much training. He basically gave them the phone and said, book appointments for us. But he did go on to say, the business owner, that their ideal client customer types were in the professional services arena. But he never went and really explained and defined what professional services meant to their cold caller, because it is a catch-all term, right? And so he was really, a little upset when the cold caller announced, at the end of the day, that he spent all day building a list, cultivating a list of churches that he was going to call into the next day, and was very excited about this. And so that's when it occurred to the MSP business owner that they never defined what professional services was. And so their cold caller thought, well, churches is a professional service. So it kind of got him thinking, okay, I need to give a little bit more direction on the types of customers that we actually do want to be making calls to. So again, just a little more of the story. Make sure that you do a good job outlining what your ideal client profile is like, how it's defined, the types of customers you want to target. And that's really kind of the first step that needs to be completed to help you build effective lists that your appointment setter is going to use, because you need to determine what is your client baseline standard. So we're not going to talk about that anymore today. If you have questions around how to define and create an ICP, we covered that very extensively in part 1. If you missed part 1, let me know and I can get you a copy of that recording. All right, and then once you have your ICP all solidified, you have an understanding of the characteristics that you want your ideal client to possess, we can start building our lists and finding companies to call upon. And so a lot of different resources you can use for this task, but I think it goes without saying, LinkedIn is probably your very best place to start because it holds the personal details of over, I think it's like 700 million users now, and it's across 200 countries. And I think the best thing about LinkedIn is that the information is freely given. It's voluntary. And for the most part, it is pretty much current and up to date. Like I don't know what your feed looks like, but I know in my feed, I'm constantly getting updates of people switching companies, getting promotions, getting new jobs. Like that's all like gold when you're trying to build your lead gen lists. So you can use the free version of LinkedIn. It gives you, I think, 4 different filters, 3 or 4 different filters to help you search by job title, location, company sector, and then you can use what you find to start curating your list of prospects to call into. Or you can purchase Sales Navigator, and by doing that, it just gives you increased search capabilities. It gets you access to, I think, 26 different filter options so that you can identify an even broader set of prospects and company names. And that's what I would probably recommend. I think it's like $80 or $100 a month. So I think that's a really good investment to make to get more granular in terms of your the types of customers that you would like to target. But what you're seeing here is just what I pulled up using the free version of LinkedIn because I don't have Sales Navigator. But really to start, you just want to make sure that you identify a vertical that you want to target, preferably a vertical that you have expertise in, experience supporting really well. You've done a customer segmentation exercise, and just let's say out of that exercise, we talked about that last week as well, that you support a good proportion of construction companies, and maybe it gets you thinking, I want to expand more into the construction vertical and find other construction companies to target, just as an example. So then you can go and need to determine, the titles, the positions, the roles of the key decision makers who work in that vertical that you want to search by. In this case, I just put in general manager, but you could put in owner, president, CEO, founder. There's a lot of different ways, different positions that you can put in there. But knowing which titles are used for each of the industries that you're intending to target, that's a really important distinction because it's going to help you identify who those key decision makers might be that you should be speaking with. As an example, legal firms, they use the roles of managing partner or senior partner to help identify, who are the higher ranking individuals within that company, who are likely the decision makers. For nonprofits, they use the director title, to kind of highlight who that top person in charge is. So it's important to know that. Then you want to use this title position, the filters within LinkedIn to then find profiles of prospects who are in this example, the construction vertical. So I put in general manager for the position. I put in Ottawa, Ontario as the location. That's where our Canadian office is. And then I put in construction as the industry filter. And just from putting in those 3 pieces, I was able to get a list of over 600 results by doing this. This is where we now need to do some work because we now need to take this list that we've generated and we now need to start researching the names to see how they compare to your ideal client profile standards that you've set for your MSP. And for those that do seem that they're going to be a good fit or possibly could be a good fit, then you kind of start to find out and research a little bit more about them so that you can personalize your approach when you do reach out. So you just want to find out the basics. What does the company do? What does the prospect specifically do within the company? Is there any news or PR items about that company that you can reference? Any fun facts that you can find out about them? You may or may not be able to get, other information like their email address, but sometimes people do put their email addresses out there because if you're not able to get them on the phone, and there's probably a very, very large chance that you won't get a lot of your prospects that you reach out to on the phone, you want to be able to leave a voicemail, but you're also going to want to leave an email or maybe connect with them on LinkedIn as well and give them a message there because the goal is really to try and build a true, kind of omni-channel outbound lead gen funnel that encompasses just more than the phone. And then we want to make sure that we get all this research that we're doing. If you feel there is potential with each company that you research, make sure it gets put somewhere. If you have a sales CRM or, just if you have SharePoint or even a Word document, because you want to be able to document this information and then be able to pull up, put in your call notes and then any other updates that you could add to that potential lead. Because the more that you know about that lead before you call them, the higher the likelihood that you're going to make a connection with them. And then, so if you're kind of new to LinkedIn, if you're not very familiar with LinkedIn, I recommended this book in last week's session. Her name is Sam Rathling. She's in the UK, and I really would think she's probably one of the highest level expert when it comes to LinkedIn. She has several books. She does such great information out on LinkedIn, free webinars, but she really focuses on how do businesses utilize LinkedIn to gain leads. So if you're not familiar with LinkedIn, looking for some information, very light reads, very easy to read on a Saturday morning over a cup of coffee, definitely recommend checking her out and downloading a couple of her books. But there's some other resources that can help besides LinkedIn. Obviously, Google would be one of them because you want to see kind of how it differs from LinkedIn. If there's any new, new businesses that pop up, you might be able to use Google Maps and kind of look for businesses in your area that kind of match, again, your ICP or the vertical that you wish to target. You also may want to, if you haven't done this already, set up Google Alerts, so that you can receive email updates of the latest relevant Google results, whether that's press releases, news items, based on how you've set up your queries or what topics you want to track. And the nice thing is that with Google Alerts, it will automatically send you the information related to prospects, customers, competitors, or any other information you might be wanting to help you generate qualified leads and drive new business for your MSP. So it's really kind of thinking about when you set up your Google Alerts, what are some trigger events in the MSP industry or trigger events in the vertical that you might be targeting that could be used as a Google alert. So you may want to set up an alert to let you know of any new businesses that might be starting up in your area or any new businesses that might be moving into your area. Any information on what your competitors might be up to or promoting. You may want to set yourself up Google Alerts for press releases on your competitors, customer reviews, acquisition details. If you happen to be an MSP that does co-managed, from a co-managed perspective, maybe set up alerts to know which companies have an IT director or a VP of technology or a CTO, so you can receive news items and press releases, from Google that, maybe it has the words VP of technology or something along that line. So you can be aware when there might be a promotion or there might be a new hire, because this could be a new contact for your team to reach out to maybe they're not using an MSP today, but maybe you could reach out and discuss the value of a partnership with an MSP and your whole co-managed approach. Or setting up alerts for companies that might be hiring IT or hiring security personnel. Or maybe set up alerts, if you happen to be supporting customers in like a regulatory, industry, any changes that are being made that could be useful to incorporate in your talk tracks, you may want to set up alerts for that as well. And then obviously Chamber of Commerce, again, really good, especially if you live in a smaller town. I know I live in a smaller town. We live 100,000 people. Our chamber is a very active chamber, much more than social media. Businesses here aren't all that keen on social media. So to find out, and to get to know the businesses in the area, they really focus on a lot of networking, and the chamber facilitates a lot of that. Obviously, you have your paid databases. You have Zoom Info, you have Hoover's, Info USA, Next Sales, the business development manager that I spoke with last week. His two big things is he uses Zoom Info, and then he partners it with LinkedIn. Those are the two big databases that his team uses, and he has hot and cold feelings about Zoom Info. He kind of said it is right 51% of the time and wrong 49% of the time. But he said when you get that information, marry it with LinkedIn, he goes, you get some pretty decent results. Also using local government databases, US Census information, professional registration groups. If you are targeting dental, legal, a lot of the times those associations have websites, and sometimes they will put their members on the website. So check out those professional registration groups. Job listing sites, Indeed, ZipRecruiter, really good because you can check job listings and look for companies that are trying to hire internal IT resources, because then you can reach out to them and start planting the seed of, you know, why bring someone in internally? Why don't you just outsource it to an MSP and let us take over the management or the security, and then that allows you to kind of focus on other things. So again, good leads there. And then when a prospect completes a form on your website, or if they're making an inquiry through an email, do you have someone within your company that calls on these companies? Because this could also be the role of your cold caller, because these are leads that need to be responded to immediately. And I thought that just seemed common sense, but I did come across a stat the other day, article I was reading, and it was saying that 50% of inbound leads from a web form or from an email inquiry, they go unanswered because there was no one being notified and no one was being tasked with responding to those types of leads. And those, it's such a sad stat because those are actually the best kind of leads. You know, that really proves that your marketing efforts are working to help fill your funnel. So we just want to make sure that we have someone on your sales team aligned to respond to those leads, to help navigate them through the funnel. And that all would start with your cold caller. There's also lead gen software, website tracking software out there that you can install onto your website, and it will track visitors who visit your site. It will let you know their company name, provide you with a lot of good information. So even if they don't do anything when they're on their site, you'll have the information that your cold caller can reach out to them and say, hey, I noticed you're visiting our site. Is there any questions I can ask for you? You know, something like that. And then, you know, wanting to find out, you know, how often do you revisit your close loss list in your CRM? You know, are you tracking your close lost list anywhere? Because, you know, maybe you have companies that are in that close loss list that you would have loved to have had won their business, but for whatever reason you didn't, and they ended up going to your competitors. So if they are still a viable dream list prospect for you, if they still meet your ideal client profile, then we want to make sure that we're adding them to our list and that we're reaching out periodically and calling them. You know, so looking when your last interaction was. If it was a couple of years ago, like 2-3 years ago, have your cold caller reach out, you know, connect with those lost prospects, because you never know, you may end up calling them on just that perfect right day when they finally decide that they regret going to that MSP, and maybe today's the day, you know what, I need to start looking for alternatives. So you want to make sure that, you know, assuming that the sales process was handled appropriately and that there's no bad will or ill will, these types of companies we should be adding to our dream list and reaching out to on a regular basis. Okay. And then starting to get into the training aspect. So as part of their initial training, you know, before we unleash them onto the phone lines, we want to make sure that they're comfortable with how to prepare for their calls. Because with advanced preparation, it is going to help maximize the probability for success, and it's going to help them, you know, sound more professional, sound more knowledgeable when they're speaking to your prospects. And so when you're looking at, you know, what their pre-call prep should include, role playing, lots and lots and lots of role playing. And I know I can hear all your groans now. You know, I'm groaning internally as well, because no one likes role playing. But the business development directors that I've spoken with that have built and continue to have very successful BDR teams, they all agree wholeheartedly that BDRs, SDRs should be spending as much time role playing as they do actually cold calling. And the one that I was speaking with last week, he's very intentional about this activity, you know, to the point where they have developed an entire company culture around their SDRs and role playing. Their SDRs know, and they are encouraged, that they can call the cell phone of any leader within their organization, you know, whether it be him as the director of business development, whether it's the chief revenue officer, whether it's the business owner, anyone in a senior leadership, the SDRs can call them to help with their role playing. All the SDR has to do is say, look, hi, this is Stephanie from Enable. Did I catch you at a bad time? And if the SDR does that cold call opener with one of the leaders, the leader knows that this is a role play, and then it's game on. And the leadership will then run that SDR through the paces. The business development director was joking. He goes, we make it as difficult as we can be. We make it contentious. We throw every objection at them. And our goal is to make the call as difficult as possible for them. But the SDR also knows that this call is going to suck, but they're going to learn and they're going to get really good practice trying to overcome those objections, because they're going to have so many objections thrown at them in real life situations. And so this is the way that they can prepare for that. And this business development director actually tracked the effectiveness of role playing and has found that those SDRs that actually did the role play, they were the most successful. And the ones that didn't do role plays, they didn't engage in that, they're not around. They didn't make it. His top SDR, he said, actually does 3 to 4 role plays a day. And he's been with them 6 months, and he's very confident that he's going to get promoted into an account exec role probably in the next 6 months. Because when you think about it, and I think this makes a lot of sense, and he's probably the 3rd or 4th BDR director that I've spoken with that actually really highlighted how critical role playing is. Because when you think about the nature of cold calling, the SDR is going to be hearing dial tones for probably, 95% of the day. People are just not going to pick up the phone. If the SDR is getting a couple, 2 or 3 pickups a day, they're going to get at max 30 seconds with that person on the other end of the line. And so good luck in trying to develop an SDR cold calling technique in just 30 seconds of interaction. It just will be extremely difficult. And so that's really the benefit and the rationale of encouraging role playing and making it part of your company culture, because it can have such a strong impact on the outcome. And then just some other, kind of pre-call success training tips, picking one vertical or one specific type of customer and just focusing on that one vertical at a time. Especially if you are supporting multiple verticals, then I really do encourage you to kind of break those verticals down, create verticalized call scripts, verticalized talk tracks, verticalized value prop statements for each of those verticals that you want to target and that you support, so we can keep the messaging consistent. And then make sure you do some research for each vertical. You want to work to understand the market, the common business challenges, the struggles that the industry might be facing, and then you want to make sure that you're mapping how your services could specifically help them. And then when you're doing your research, make sure that you're going back to and leveraging your existing happy customers. Ask them about their experiences and get their feedback and what it's like working with you, and so that you can help, kind of use that information to help formulate your messaging and then get that feedback into your call scripts. So you want to, ask your good customers, why did you sign with us? Why do you like working with us? Why are you continuing working with us? Get that feedback. Also see if you can get their permission to name drop. Again, if you are focusing on a particular vertical, if you have a prominent customer within that vertical, ask them if would you mind if I just, say that we support you, kind of name drop, as we're creating our call scripts. Most of the time, they won't care. Just get their permission. Because by using this vertical approach, it will really help in your overall cold calling efforts, because it's going to help make your calls more focused, scalable, repeatable. It's going to allow your telemarketer to kind of, really get in the groove as they're talking to the same types of businesses who are experiencing the same business challenges, the struggles. They probably have a lot of the same priorities. And so you can really focus the talk track around how you have helped solve these business challenges, with other businesses that are in the same vertical. And then once all those businesses in that vertical have been called, so maybe you spend a couple of days on one vertical, switch gears, and then, focus on another vertical. Just make sure you've kind of, updating your call scripts, updating your messaging, updating your value prop so that it aligns well to that new vertical that you're calling into. And then once you have your list developed, you are now, one step closer to unleashing your SDRs on the phones, having them to call in to prospective companies and make appointments for you. But cold calling into organizations that don't know you, it's a very tough gig. We all know that. And so again, your SDR is probably going to hear every objection under the sun that's going to undermine their chances of them being able to book an appointment between yourself and them. And so we want to anticipate what those objections could be, and then ensure that we are equipping our appointment setter with, good scripts, good responses to help them address and overcome any of the objections that they may likely hear. So two of the challenges, when we start to actually get on the phone, that SDRs typically have is, who should I be speaking with? And then how do I reach that person? And so to help with this challenge, definitely you're going to want to figure out, what's the org chart like at that client that you're going to be calling into. Who is the president, CEO, business owner, like how do they call themselves? See if you can find out information on who their executive assistants are. What are the other C-level executives that report into that CEO? Who are some other, managers there? See if you can find out who the office manager is, the front desk reception person. You can probably find a lot of this information just by going to their website or piecing it together via LinkedIn. If you do subscribe to Sales Navigator, they actually do have an account mapping feature that can help you with putting together the company's org chart and the reporting structure there. And so once you have kind of a handle on that, obviously we want to start at the top, right? You want to connect with the person that is the president, the CEO, the business owner. If we're targeting traditional managed services, so that outsourced approach, or we might be trying to target CTOs or CIOs or directors of IT if we're targeting organizations in more of a co-managed type of program. So there is so much training on this, different methods that you can use to reach that person at the top. A lot of the times it's just going to be trial and error to kind of see what strategy works for you. I think it gets to be more of an art than a science at this point. So you are going to have to use a couple of different strategies. I'm just going to talk about a couple today that if you haven't used these before, then you can include that into maybe your arsenal. So let's go through a couple of examples, kind of putting this into action. The first tactic that I'm going to talk about to try and reach that CEO, president, business owner, we call it the top-down approach. And it uses two concepts. It uses the concept of assumed familiarity and the concept of leverage. Because in a lot of cases, the president's direct line isn't going to be something that's typically published. And so you probably aren't going to be able to call them directly to try and get a hold of them. Most time, what's probably the reality is, you're going to have to call into the main line of the company. And you're going to get connected to the front desk clerk or an office manager, that gatekeeper type of person. And you're going to ask, obviously, if you can speak to the president or CEO. In our example, let's call this person Janet. So you're going to call in. Andrea, the receptionist, is going to pick up the phone, and she'll probably say something like, hello, this is Andrea. Thank you for calling ABC Company. Your opening line could be, hey, Andrea, this is Stephanie. I'm looking to talk to Janet. Would you mind putting me through, please? And so this kind of approach is based on implying that there's a sense of familiarity and trying to get past Andrea, get past that gatekeeper in order to reach Janet's office. And the BDR director that I spoke with last week, he coined this. He says, this is the assumed familiarity approach. And this is the approach that his team uses most often and has the most success with. Because he finds that a lot of time, just by saying, hey, Andrea, this is Stephanie. I'm looking to talk to Janet. Could you patch me through? Just with the way you say it and your tone and using Janet's first name, a lot of the times you'll get put through. Because it makes like Janet, like Janet's your friend, because we're only using her first name. And your tone of voice is everything here. You use that authority and credibility in your speech, and a lot of times you're going to be put through. And I can concur with this. When I was in sales, I used to do that all the time. Although I didn't think of this as that term of assumed familiarity, but I just made it look like that I knew the person and that they were expecting my call. And I just said, hey, can you put me through, please and thank you. So I just kept it very direct and very succinct. So we know though that if I can get past Andrea, we know that probably Janet is very likely not going to be picking up her phone. Probably close to 100% of the time, they'll probably either let it go to voicemail, or maybe the call would get routed to Janet's executive assistant. And in this case, we're going to call her June. And so June may pick up the phone or might go to voicemail. But if we're lucky enough to have June actually answer her phone, we could have a conversation something like this. Hi, June, it's Stephanie Hammond. I'm wondering if you could help me. I'm looking to speak to Janet, but I'm not sure if she's the right person that I should actually be speaking with. Would you know who the best person would be to talk about your security and the management of your company's IT network and computers? So by doing this this top-down approach, this also gives us a second concept that we call leverage, because there's a couple of things that could happen at this point. June, the president's EA, could then automatically transfer you to the level below Janet that they feel best could help you. And so using this example, let's say she transfers you to a senior manager, and we're going to call him Jake. And Jake, seeing that it's Janet's office calling, could very likely pick up the phone because he sees that the call is coming from Janet's office. Like, who does not pick up the phone when their boss is calling them, right? Or June transfers you to Jake's line, but it goes to voicemail and you have to leave a message. But if Jake happens to pick up the phone, then a possible, script at this point could be something like, hi, Jake, it's Stephanie from Primetime Inc. I was just speaking to June at Janet's office, asking about, how does the IT network and security, how is it currently being managed at XYZ company? And they thought it'd be best to speak with you about that. So by referencing June and Janet, when you get connected to Jake, it gives you what we do call leverage. June and Janet are in effect, vouching for you because they have passively given their permission for Jake to take your call, speak with you, or return your call if you had to leave a voicemail message. It's also a great approach to use because it gives you a better chance that you're going to get connected to actually the right person that you need to speak with versus who you thought was the right person that you wanted to speak with. Because you could be calling and calling and calling into a particular company, maybe trying to connect with Julie, and when you look at LinkedIn, maybe you see that Julie is in purchasing, so maybe you make that assumption that she should be the person that's making the purchasing decisions and that you should be talking to her, when it really was Jake all along. So again, just by using this top-down approach, starting with the receptionist, getting bumped up to the CEO's office, and then you get to the president's EA, who then puts you to Jake, who's the right person speaking with. Using this concept of leverage, you now have the right person and the best person that you should be speaking with. And so I like this approach because it does help to address two of the most common challenges that the SDR is going to face when they start calling prospects. Who should they be speaking with, and how do you try and reach them? Now, the second scenario that could happen, when you're trying to reach Janet, the CEO, we're going to need to, have a little bit more finesse here, and it's probably going to be more of the norm. So let's say the assumed familiarity approach doesn't end up working for us. They're not buying it. So instead of them transferring directly us to Janet, the front desk manager, the office manager, the receptionist, they're going to start asking questions to try and suss out who are we actually. Because remember, it is the gatekeeper's job to screen calls in order to keep salespeople at bay. They are hyper trained at this. They are well skilled to keep you from reaching the very person that you want and need to speak with. So I've listed here kind of the top questions that you need your SDRs to be prepared to answer. You know, what is this regarding? What's this in reference to? Are they expecting your call? Is this a sales call? Can I take a message? Nope, they're not available right now. You know, can you leave your number and I'll get you to call them, or I'll have them call you back, or can you email or mail over some information? So if we're calling in, we're trying to ask for Janet, we're not going to get her. They're probably going to tell us, you know what, Janet is unavailable right now. What is this regarding? Or what is this in reference to? And they ask this question, they use it as a tool to see if in fact you are a salesperson or not. And I think it's a pretty effective approach. So a couple of responses that your SDR could try giving. Again, this is all going to be trial and error. There's going to be, forgot to mention, the following slides are probably going to be very, very wordy. Take screenshots if you want to take screenshots, because I'm not able to actually send out the presentation afterwards. So if there's any scripting that you want to have access to, just take a screenshot so that you can review it afterwards, because I think pretty much the rest of the boot camp is going to be all scripting and possible responses. So just my caveat there. So, but anyways, you know, your SDR is going to hear that question, what is this regarding, or what is this in reference to? And so a response could be, look, I need your help. And then have them recite whatever your MSP's value proposition statement is, that one-line statement that simply shares how your MSP services can help businesses like theirs. So as an example, your SDR can kind of respond back with, I need your help. You know, the purpose of my call is, you know, we work to secure and protect the network infrastructure of businesses to help them avoid the costly consequences of unexpected cyber attacks and unplanned employee downtime. And then you just pause. And then you wait to see what they say after that. Because this is an answer that they likely weren't expecting to hear, and they likely won't know how to respond back. Because your value prop statement mentions, you know, how your MSP improves and protects businesses. And so that's a key thing. That's a big value. That's a big benefit. So it'd be very difficult for the gatekeeper to respond back with a typical response of, we're not interested, or we don't need anything like that, because how could they not be interested or need something like that? So one approach. The second approach that you can try, slight variation of the first, being a little bit more direct and upfront, just saying, look, I need your help. You know, we work with businesses like yours to secure and protect the network infrastructure of businesses to help them avoid the costly consequences of unexpected cyber attacks and unplanned employee downtime. If you could transfer into Janet's office so I can set up a meeting with her, it would be greatly appreciated. Thank you. And then end it with that strategic pause. And this is probably the most important point, because it's the way you say thank you and including that strategic pause at the end that makes it sound like you are someone who's credible, that you do have authority. And again, it's just the tonality of your voice and the way you are succinct and kind of phrase things that will often get the gatekeeper to just kind of patch you through. Or maybe the gatekeeper says, what is this regarding? Your SDR could try saying, well, Andrea, my boss wanted me to give Janet a call to arrange a meeting, and I was hoping I might be able to catch her for a quick chat to book something, as I had a free moment myself. If you could forward me up to her office, it'd be greatly appreciated. Thank you. Or they may say, are they expecting your call? And the big thing here is don't lie. You know, never encourage your SDR to lie. Again, just say in a confident manner, actually, no, she's not expecting my call at the moment, but I was hoping to catch her because I had a free moment myself. If you wouldn't mind forward me up to Janet's office, that'd be greatly appreciated. Thank you. And again, it's saying that thank you in a very deliberate manner with that air of authority and that air of credibility. Or they may say, nope, Janet's not available right now. Is this a sales call? Because Janet doesn't take sales calls. Because this is going to be your SDR making the calls, there's a couple of different approaches that you can take here. You know, with the first approach, you know, remember your SDR is an appointment setter. So they're actually not trying to sell them anything. That's not the point of the appointment setter. It's just to get that meeting booked, and that's it. And so the first possible response to this question, if you get, is this a sales call? This is useful if maybe you sent out any sort of marketing material ahead of time, like maybe you sent out an email or a flyer or a direct mail card or a newsletter, or maybe you sent out a gift box or something, because maybe this is a very high leveled or high ranking business that's on your dream list. And so your SDR could say something like, actually, no, I'm not in a sales capacity here at Primetime Inc. I support our marketing efforts. And I'm actually calling to a quarter meeting with Janet and our president to talk about your network and IT security management requirements based on a recent email, gift box, flyer, whatever that we sent over. So if you wouldn't mind transferring up to Janet's office, that'd be great. Thank you. Or you can be direct and say, yes, it is. I would like to set up a high-level strategic conversation between our two organizations to talk about the IT management and security requirements. So if you can transfer me up to Janet's office, that'd be wonderful. Thank you. Or maybe the gatekeeper says, Janet's unavailable right now. Can I just take a message? In this answer, we don't want to appear dismissive with the gatekeeper's offer to help, but we do want to respond back with something like, you can, however, it's going to be, pretty long and detailed, so it just might be easier if I can just call her back later. Do you happen to know when there might be a better time that I could reach her? And this works because the gatekeeper likely should have access to the decision maker's calendar. They should be able to kind of pull it up and let you know when the next opening is next. So we really do want to avoid, if possible, leaving messages with the gatekeeper, because the chances are very high that that message is never going to get passed along. So try and find out when you can call back. Or the gatekeeper may say, Janet's unavailable right now, just leave your number and I will have her call you back. And so again, it's kind of very similar to the last one. I can leave my number, but I'm going into a meeting shortly and I don't want to annoy her by not being available when she calls me back. Maybe you can let me know the best time to call her back would be, and I will call her back at that time. Or they may say, can you just email something over, or can you just mail some information over to me just to get you off the phone? And so again, a couple of responses here. You could say, yeah, I would be more than happy to send over some information. However, we have a lot of different pieces available. It just might be easier if we can set up a meeting between Jan and our president and have them chat about what's most important to her, because I don't want to overload her inbox with a bunch of irrelevant attachments. And if that doesn't work, at least with this approach, we're going to get an email address out of them, right? That you can add to your email marketing database to help you build out your email audience. So it's not an entirely wasted attempt, but again, cold calling is only one piece of the lead gen puzzle. So hopefully you also have an email strategy in place. So even if you do get this response, you now have an email address that you can add to your database so that you can continue to be in contact with them and they can continue learning about your MSP. And then just make sure that you diarize to call back in a week or two, again, asking to speak to Janet and see if maybe she has any questions around the material that you sent over earlier, and see if you can schedule a call at that point. But this is also where you really need to make sure that your content marketing strategy is strong to ensure that the material that you do send over is targeted directly to them, that it speaks directly to them, to their industry, to their market, to the trends, the challenges, the threats, the opportunities, all of that exists within their industry. And you are very, have that authority, and that you're able to talk about how you can actually help their business. So the information that you send over, it can't be generic, because if it is, if there's nothing in the material that you're going to send over that really sets you apart from, the MSP down the street or whoever they might be using today, then you're not going to get that opportunity for a meeting. And so we really don't want to blow our chance with this. So think about what goes into the package that you do send over. If you're going to mail something over, are you going to include something like an ebook or a report or a checklist, a white paper, case studies, testimonials from happy customers? You just want to make sure that whatever you do send over has an educational slant to it, that makes it like you are a technology expert in their industry. And then if you can do that, they will be more likely to maybe get that appointment booked when you call back as a follow-up. Or maybe they just flatly say, Janet's not available right now. So see if maybe we can try and uncover an alternative way to contact them that doesn't involve interacting with the gatekeeper. Asking them, well, what is the best way to get a hold of Janet? Does she prefer email, cell phone? Is the direct dial extension then that you would like me to use? And if the gatekeeper doesn't provide an alternative method of contact, then again, coming back and asking, well, what is the best time to reach Janet? And see if the gatekeeper will give you some alternative times when Janet might be available to speak. Or see if you can enlist their help and use them and see if they can put you in touch with maybe someone else within the company that you can speak with if you can't connect with the business owner directly. Or interview them, interview the gatekeeper, see if they can give you the information that you need out of them to help you build your case so you can get to the right decision maker. So one response could be, you know what, I completely understand that Janet is a very busy person, especially as I'm calling out of the blue. Maybe you can point me to someone else that reports into her. I really would love to have the opportunity to speak to someone who would be more directly involved in the daily management security decisions pertaining to your IT infrastructure. Do you happen to know who that person would be that I should be trying to reach out to then? Or use the gatekeeper to help build your case so that when you hopefully get connected to the decision maker later on, you have some really good ammunition that you can use in your conversation. And I think this is a really good approach when trying to maybe connect with a CTO or a CIO for a co-managed services offering. So if the gatekeeper says, Janet's not available, or the CTO that that you're trying to get a hold of is not available, then following up and saying, well then, I'm sure you might be able to help me then if I can get your opinions on something. And the gatekeeper, the receptionist, they might be pleased to hear this response because it's likely not a whole lot of people are coming to them seeking their opinion on things. So they might be pretty willing to help. So you can continue on by saying, look, we're doing a quick survey. We work with a lot of companies that are similar to yours, and we're just looking to talk to some end users. So I'm just curious, how much downtime do you guys experience on a monthly basis? How often does your laptop not work when you come into work, or something happens with your laptop that interferes with the work that you need to get done? And so the receptionist might respond back with something like, well, not all that often, maybe 1 or 2 days a month where I won't be able to log into anything. And then it just takes some time for our IT department to fix that. So I'm pretty much stuck until someone from IT can come around and address my ticket. And then the SDR could ask some additional follow-up questions, maybe around turnover at that point, because if it's taking half a day for the receptionist to get someone to look at her laptop, why is that? Is the IT department maybe short-staffed? So they could ask, how often do you guys hire for new people in your IT department? And then, because depending on how they respond, it might expose some pretty significant HR issues that they might be grappling with, where again, it opens up the opportunity for you to position your co-managed, your supplemental services. But then maybe, the receptionist responds back and says, oh, we bring in IT people all the time, which means if they are experiencing rapid turnover, it explains why it's taking longer for tickets to get looked at. And again, maybe the organization is getting tired of having to vet new IT people every single month. Maybe they can look at outsourcing. So when you're trying to build your case, you want your SDR to ask very thoughtful, open-ended questions that will help you get an understanding around the end user experiences at that company. Getting the gatekeeper or maybe any other individuals that you might end up getting connected with that aren't the decision maker, get them to tell you about their technology experiences and what they're struggling with. And that will give you the ammunition that you need for when you eventually do hopefully connect with that decision maker. So really asking questions around, do you like your laptop? Do you enjoy working on your laptop? You're going to quickly find out if they have the latest and greatest in laptop technology, or if they're using maybe some, older pieces of equipment that might be heavy and slow and loud, which will then empower your SDR to bring that information up, in a week or two when they can finally maybe get that CTO, CIO on the line. Because if the SDR is able to connect with the CTO, they can say, hey, look, I was talking with Andrea, your front office manager, a few weeks ago. Were you aware that she's working on a 6-year-old machine? Do you know why that is? And maybe the CTO responds back with, oh, well, we just replace laptops as they break, and hers likely just hasn't broken yet. Then your SDR can say, well, she was mentioning that she does experience issues a couple of times a month where she can't do anything until the IT department is able to come to her desk and have a look, which she says can take, half a day or more sometimes, depending on how busy the team is. I'm curious, do you not have a traditional asset refresh cycle at your company? And maybe the CTO says something like, well, no, not really. Oh, okay, well, do you work with a managed service provider currently? And, maybe they come back and say, yeah, we do actually. So this is where your SDR can start raising doubt in the CTO's mind about the effectiveness of that MSP partnership, because the SDR could comment back with something like, well, why haven't they outlined that for you then? And then maybe the CTO says, well, we only really talk to them about once a year or so. And this SDR, obviously should be, have a strong reaction to that and say something like, well, that's crazy. Your MSP doesn't meet with you on a regular basis to have these kinds of high-level conversations. They're supposed to be your technology partner. I'm really shocked to hear that. So again, by asking these types of thoughtful, open-ended questions of the gatekeeper, hearing about their experiences working with IT, this is really going to help your SDR really, kind of craft an entire pitch for why that CTO should hear you out and take that appointment. Because by building the case and breaking down barriers, it opens up that opportunity where, the SDR can say to the CTO, you know what? We work with companies like yours to help implement a refresh cycle that makes sense for their business so that end users are not negatively impacted by laptop users. Maybe we should set up a meeting and have you speak with someone from our team so we can highlight our approach as a point of comparison. Because you really do want the CTO to ask themselves, why don't I have a standard refresh cycle? I have an MSP, I pay them a whole lot of money every month, yet I barely ever hear from them, and they haven't set up anything like this for me. They're very reactive in how they work with us, and that's obviously not working. Maybe I could use a better MSP. And so if the SDR can kind of get them thinking along these lines, they're going to take that meeting. Because again, the idea of building your case is to get the person on the other end of the line to keep talking so you can keep collecting the intel that's needed that's going to motivate them to want to take that meeting with you. And if you can train your SDRs to keep asking those thoughtful, open-ended questions to kind of keep that decision maker or keep that gatekeeper talking, they're going to increase the chances of getting that appointment, but you're also going to increase the chances that the appointment's going to stick because they've raised some genuine concerns with that decision maker. It's also really good information that you could use as part of a follow-up email, and it will help you actually write a better quality email that you can send to your decision maker after speaking with a receptionist. And again, having an email like this will hopefully improve the chances that you're actually going to get a response back from the decision maker. So you could write something like, hi Jan, I had the pleasure to speak with Andrea, your office manager, the other day, and she was mentioning that she's really struggling with her computer to the point that it's preventing her from doing her job 1 to 2 days a month. I'm not sure if you're currently working with another managed service provider at the moment, but this is something we can assist with as part of our standard services for our clients. If you would like to learn more about how we assist and work with our organizations, just let me know and I can set up a time to introduce you to our team. And so it might, upon reading this, it might get Janice to think, oh, goodness, there's a problem in my company that I may or may not know about, but this person just kind of presented me with the easiest solution of all, and all I have to do is tell them when I'm available to speak. Pretty cool. So it's really all about positioning yourself to actually matter to them. Decision makers, they get emails all the time, they get calls all the time, they see them, they're just choosing not to respond because they know it doesn't apply to them. But as soon as you can connect the dots in their brain and present them with something that is timely and relevant to their business, that will increase the chances that they're going to call you back. Okay, so really looking the keys to success with any approach of trying to get past the gatekeeper is to be positive and to be confident. Again, you want to make it look like you are important and that you know that decision maker. A lot of the times is just that simple. And so we don't really need to overthink a lot of this, because if you sound important and you make it appear that you know that decision maker, that assumed familiarity concept from earlier, it's going to make the gatekeeper think that you are someone who's important, and they'll be more inclined to kind of patch you through to the person that you want to speak with. So you want to ensure that your SDR speaks clearly, doesn't stutter, doesn't stumble over their words. You don't want them seeing ums and ahs and, phrasing their statements like questions. Remind them to breathe, remind them to speak with authority, like they are the ones that are in control. Because when you sound apprehensive, anxious, stressed, you're sending out warning signals that you're not a pro, and that you're not in control, and that you don't know that decision maker. And the office manager, they're going to take all that tonality in your voice, and they're going to shut you down fast. And so again, that's why that role playing and building a culture of role playing within your MSP is so critical, because it's going to allow your SDR to practice in the worst way possible, but they're going to be able to practice, they're going to be able to gain that confidence, but in a safer environment. So let's say that your SDR was successful in getting past the gatekeeper and they were able to reach Janet and get her on the phone. Now we want to look at what kind of scripting should you have in place now to help capitalize on this momentous occasion. Because again, no one likes being cold called. And if your appointment setter is able to get past the gatekeeper and actually connect with the decision maker on the phone, you want to equip them for success. And having different scripts prepared ahead of time to assist with your cold caller, this is going to help improve their success rates. And while these script ideas are meant to assist and benefit, they should be rehearsed repeatedly, again in that role-playing mock call format, until they sound as natural as possible, because you don't want your SDR to come across as being kind of scripted and sound like a robot. So you really want to use these as a guide to help navigate that conversation. It's always easier to have your telemarketer make calls if they are following up on something that maybe that was sent out ahead of time to your prospect base. Again, maybe it was an email or a letter that was sent out around a specific campaign you might be running, or maybe it's some sort of specific educational event that you might be holding, maybe around security or data protection. And so that is why leveraging other marketing activities in conjunction with your cold calling efforts will prove helpful. It will give the telemarketer a purpose for calling, helps them to feel like they have something of value to offer, as opposed to just calling out of the blue. So it's always easier to have your telemarketer make calls if they're following up on something that was sent out ahead of time to your prospect base. And that's why leveraging other marketing activities in conjunction with your cold calling efforts is going to be helpful, because it's going to, again, give your telemarketer a purpose for calling and helps them to feel that they do have something to offer and they're just not, again, like I said, kind of calling out of the blue. So just a big tip, if you are going to do something like this, when you're sending out any sort of mail out or any sort of snail mail or electronic item, send out your pieces in smaller batches, say 25 or 50 at a time. Don't go and mass mail all 500 or 1,000 at a time, because you want to send out your mailers in manageable chunks, because it's going to allow your telemarketer the time to call into each of those individual businesses in a timely manner, while the mailer is hopefully still fresh in their mind. So if you send out all 1,000 mailers at a time, the telemarketer is never going to be able to get around to calling all of these people in a week. So only send out really what your caller can realistically handle in a week to 10 days time. So one approach to an opening line that you could try using when you've sent out something to your prospect ahead of time. And so now you're reaching out to follow up to schedule that appointment. And again, you're going to want to try a couple of different approaches to kind of see what approach works best. But, you know, one approach could be, hi, Janet, this is Stephanie Hammond. And you just pause for a moment to give your prospect some time to think. Stephanie, do I know this person? And then you continue after a slight pause. I'm calling from Primetime Inc. And then pause again just for a second so the prospect can begin thinking, primetime, should I know them? And then continue on with your value prop statement. Primetime Inc. is your local provider of comprehensive IT cybersecurity services and support. We work with organizations in the whatever industry you're calling into to provide security awareness training and implement our proven best practices when it comes to safeguarding their sensitive data against the latest cyber threats. And then continue on with the ask. You would have received whatever the nailer was, whatever the postcard was, whatever the letter, the webinar invite the other day, and I wanted to reach out to follow up on any questions you may have and see if we can book some time to meet to learn more about your organization's current network environment and discuss how we can enhance the cybersecurity posture via our tailored mix of security services. You know, so again, just keeping it, you know, succinct, utilizing those strategic pauses to get a response from the decision maker. Or if there isn't a specific campaign or an event going on that your telemarketer can promote, another example of the opening line can be, you know, hi Janet, my name is Stephanie Hammond. Again, that strategic pause, give them a moment to think about how they know you. I'm calling from Primetime Inc. Again, pause to let them determine if they know Primetime Inc. or not. And then again, moving forward with your MSP's value prop statement, and then going in and asking for the appointment. You know, the reason for my call is to see if we can set up a time to meet so I can learn more about your organization, how it's being currently protected from cyber threats, and to see if Primetime Inc. can do anything to help reduce your cyber risk and increase your overall security posture. Or use the compliance angle to help fashion your opening line. You can say something like, hi Janet, my name is Stephanie Hammond. You can do that pause. I'm calling from Primetime Inc. Slight pause. And then again, moving forward with your MSP's value prop statement, and then going in and asking for that appointment. So as part of whatever industry or vertical, your organization falls under the whatever the compliance standard is. And so the reason for my call is to see if we can set up a time to meet so I can learn more about what your organization is doing to ensure it's adhering to the standards being enforced today by that compliance regulation, and then see where Primetime Inc. can help XYZ company demonstrate and prove their ongoing compliance in order to avoid punitive penalties. So again, the reason for the call is just to set up the appointment, not to have your SDR do any of that selling, and avoid the temptation of getting into a lengthy conversation with prospects over the phone, because that could just be a strategy of theirs to try and avoid the meeting with you in the first place. You know, the extended conversation should happen in person, not on the phone. So that's actually the purpose of the appointment is then to learn about them, learn about their organization, their industry, and not go on and on about your MSP. This is mostly best done in person. And so that's why we include in our opening script, the reason for my call is to see about scheduling an appointment to learn more about you. Okay. But again, no one likes being cold called. If your appointment setter is able to get past the gatekeeper, actually connect with the decision maker on the phone, it will be inevitable that as they begin speaking with them in their attempts to try and secure that appointment, they're going to receive pushback and they're going to get some negativity. But we all know that being told no and dealing with objections is a huge part of the SDR's role. So we just want to make sure that we are setting the telemarketer up for success, that we give them well-scripted, well-prepared answers to the most common objection that they're likely going to hear so they can address them, learn from them, and then hopefully win that coveted appointment. And again, objections, pushback, those are all good things. You know, objections actually work to help open the door by allowing your telemarketer to highlight a few of the key benefits to your services which will hopefully create some curiosity, hopefully motivate the prospect to want to schedule an appointment with you to discuss further. So I've listed here some of the common objections that you should have scripted answers for, including your training program, and we'll go through each of them here. So the first objection that you might hear is, you know what, sorry, but I have never heard of your company before. This isn't really an objection, but it just means that you haven't done a good enough job of marketing your organization to your target audience. And this lack of knowledge about your company in the marketplace is something that's within your control. You know, having that online social presence, it's really critical in today's day and age, as this is, you know, how you build up your expertise, how you perceived to be that trusted advisor in your virtual audience space. So use this type of objection to restate your value prop statement, you know, your elevator pitch, highlighting what problems and services you will help solve for them. This is where it's good if we can name drop, right? That's why we ask those permissions when we're doing our research. You know, name drop if possible, especially if we are servicing other customers in the same vertical, because it's going to help give us that instant credibility. Encourage the prospect to go check out your website, your LinkedIn, your Facebook. Allow them to invite them to follow you, and then have them go check out your customer case studies, reviews, and testimonials. Because it is going to be these types of social proof that's going to help familiarize your prospects with your organization, and it's going to help alleviate a lot of the risk that they might be feeling in engaging with a business that they've never heard of, especially if you are showing evidence in your feeds of other businesses in the same vertical that you are supporting successfully. So a possible response could be, you know what, we're Primetime Inc. We help engineering firms in the metropolitan area remain protected from cyber attacks and other network breaches so their employees can work securely from really anywhere and everywhere. We're actually the preferred IT provider for XYZ engineering company for the last 5 years, and we actually helped them avoid a breach last year through enrollment in our cybersecurity and fundamentals program. So I would love it if we could, if you would check us out on LinkedIn, start following us. Feel free to check out our website. But I think this is also where maybe a meeting with our security specialist would work well. You know, she can use the opportunity to learn more about your organization, what you're doing from a cybersecurity protection standpoint, and then review what steps we take to proactively secure all of our customers from cyber attacks, just like we have with XYZ. Okay. Or another way to handle this, especially if maybe you're a smaller MSP that doesn't have a big marketing budget at the moment, own it. And, you know, by saying, look, there's over 35,000 MSPs in America, in the US, and, you know, there is, you know, X number in our immediate area. So I'm not surprised that you may not have heard of us. We have a pretty low marketing budget, but I would like to, you know, explain to you, you know, maybe over the next 20, 30 minutes in a meeting, how we are different from the other 34,999 MSPs that are out there. And so this is where, again, you want to have kind of your elevator pitch ready to go to explain why you are different and why you do matter. Another common objection you're likely hear, you know what, we already have an MSP. We're not really looking to switch. So I look at this as being kind of the dreaded status quo. This one is difficult to initially overcome because people don't want to switch unless there's a strong reason to do so. But this is also a good objection to hear, as it tells them we don't have to educate them on what managed services is. They're already familiar with the benefits that an MSP can provide. So I look at that as all being kind of a good thing. The bad news is that they're using one of your competitors, and displacing an incumbent is a very difficult thing to do. So this is not time for your SDR to go into an exhaustive side-by-side narrative around how you're better, how you're different from your competitor. Really, the main goal here is to try and pique your prospect's curiosity around what they might be missing out on. So you want to do a discovery to kind of find out what you're up against. And this discovery will be invaluable, especially if you're able to, you know, book an appointment with them at some point in the future, because then you're going to be able to kind of refer back to some of this information that you're collecting in this initial call. So a possible response, if you hear an objection like this, that we're not looking to switch because we have somebody, it's so great to see that you're taking the security and management of your network seriously. Do you mind me asking who you're using today? If they provide the name of your competitor, that's fantastic. Be excited over this. Never disparage a competitor. But you can continue on by saying, you know what, ABC company, they're a great organization from what I've learned, and I'm not looking to displace any good relationships. So have you been satisfied with the relationship and the services you've been receiving from them? You know, if we had to do a scale of 1 to 10, 1 is awful, 10 is the best in the world, how would you rate the relationship with ABC company? You know, if they give you a rating of 8 to 10, congratulate them. Ask them what they like best that warranted giving them such a high rating, and then make sure that you're incorporating this into your own MSP business structure if you don't have it currently. If they give you a rating of maybe 7 or below, or if they give you a rating of 5 or below, you know, then you can ask, you know, wow, that seems like a very low score, you know, because you want to put some doubt in their mind. You know, can I ask specifically what made you give that score? And this should hopefully get them talking about what their issues are with their existing MSP, which will hopefully provide you with really good data that can be leveraged in the sales process if you get to that stage. Just be sure to document this so that you can really kind of highlight what you are going to do to help earn that business. But regardless, this is where you set yourself up to be that possible alternative should anything change on their end. And you can say something like, you know what, we work with a lot of MSPs, and often you'll find that your existing MSP, they might be good at certain things, but as you grow and as you evolve, perhaps you're finding that you've outgrown that MSP and that you need consulting services, or you need enhanced cybersecurity services, or you need something that is more mature than what your MSP can offer you now. It's always good to have options should anything change. I do think it would be beneficial if I could schedule a 20 or 30-minute meeting with, you know, whoever the salesperson is, so we can learn a little bit more about how your existing MSP is assisting you today, you know, with your cybersecurity needs, with your compliance requirements, because that's what we specialize in. And then we can share how we compare and contrast ABC company when it comes to supporting our clients. That way, should anything change, you can always consider us as your backup. And then if they're not interested in speaking with you further, see if you can find out when their existing contract comes up for renewal, if it would be okay to reach back out and revisit the conversation at renewal time. And then if they do say yes, just make sure that we diarize that and that we do return their call to see if they would entertain that meeting. And then always don't forget to invite them to check out your website, follow you on LinkedIn, reach out to them, see if you get an email address, and then use this as an activity to start that virtual relationship with them so that you can continue to build awareness and authority through your content marketing. Or maybe they say something, you know what, we already have an MSP, but how much do you charge? Don't get drawn in and start talking price at this point. You know, as the SDR, encourage them just to kind of laugh it off and plead ignorance. You know, your SDR can kind of play that, you know, stupid SDR card to help them get around having to answer a question like this. And so they can respond back with, you know what, without really knowing and understanding your business and what your security and compliance requirements are, our per user price can vary. And I'm not the right person that can speak eloquently to this. Why don't we set up a time to have you meet with whatever name, where they can learn more about your organization, your goals, your business growth drivers, because those are all variables that will help us better define the overall client engagement strategy. And then that will allow us to talk more comprehensively about our pricing, because every business is different. They have different security and compliance requirements that we can help solve. So the price is going to be different. And then in situations where you already have kind of your face-to-face discovery meeting, and then you're starting to line up your next appointment to complete your cybersecurity and your business workflow assessment, that is when it is appropriate to start talking ballpark pricing. But when you're making a cold call, it's usually a tactic used by the prospects to get you off the phone as quickly as possible. So just don't have your SDR fall for it. They can really lean into the fact that they're just the SDR. but they can connect the prospect or the decision maker with extremely intelligent resources who are better equipped at answering that question for them. Or you might hear, I'm just too busy right now. And so when a prospect uses this objection, what they often mean is, you're not a priority right now, and my time would be better spent elsewhere. But the nice thing is when you hear this objection is, you don't want to talk to them now anyways. You're only interested in setting up an appointment so you can meet with them in person sometime in the future when it is convenient to them. So you can respond back with something like, no problem at all. I completely understand that I've caught you at a bad time. My hope is that we can schedule a time to meet so I can learn more about your organization, the security measurements that you currently have in place today, to see if this is something that Primetime Inc. might be able to assist you with that could help improve your competitiveness, your overall organizational efficiencies, to help you better manage your costs and improve revenues. Or another way to handle this I'm too busy objection, and this came right from the business development director that I spoke with last week. When he hears this objection, he tells his team to comment back with, you're too busy, and then he'll play the silent game with them. He actually cautions his new SDR trainees that they will play the silent game a lot on their phone calls. And so they need to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, because the silence game is going to get awkward, and it's going to get awkward quickly. But they need to hang in tight and allow it to play out, so it forces the prospect to speak first. And then if you can make it through that awkwardness, you're going to be pleasantly surprised of what will come out of the prospect's mouth next, because human nature is to fill in that awkward void, right? We just need to train the SDR to not be the first person to fill that void. So this is another, I think, really good tactic to use when you're speaking to a CTO or a CIO and they're telling you that they're too busy right now. Great opportunity for you to position your co-managed services. So if you parrot the question back to them and say, you're too busy, and then let them squirm and wait, that CTO will begin talking, and they're going to feel obliged to give you an explanation as to why they are too busy. And oftentimes, what comes out is their very best, most pressing pain point. Maybe they tell you that they've been going through a migration for a while, and it's not going all that great, and it's all they can think about. This is where your SDR can ask them some pointed questions about, what kind of migration are you doing? Maybe the CTO tells you, oh, we're going from AWS to Azure, and it's been taking us a couple of months now. Depending on what the prospect says, your SDR could then say, book some time, send over one of your Azure engineers to discuss the migration and the obstacles that they're facing. And so by having this initial conversation to discuss options around what's maybe stopping the migration from working, it could possibly move forward to where your MSP could get into some consulting work with them, or maybe the discussion leads to other services that you can assist them with. And when the business development director that was telling me about this tactic and how effective it was, I'm not gonna lie, it kind of made me cringy, because no one likes that awkward silence. It's painful and you want to speak up and you want to say something, but he finds it works really, really well. He swears that the amount and wealth of information that they get out of the prospect when they play the silence game is really helpful in getting them to position that initial appointment. But yeah, it just involves making the prospect feel a little awkward at first. You may get the, I'm just not interested. And this objection is typically a knee-jerk reaction that happens once your contact realizes that they've answered a sales call. The trick is to figure a way to keep the conversation going and get that appointment booked. Because if you've done your due diligence, you've done the proper prep and research prior to the call, this company and this person made it onto your contact list for a reason. They match the profile of buyers who would be interested in your offering. So a possible response to this objection is, you know what, I understand. That is what many of our customers initially said before they understood that Primetime Inc. could potentially save them thousands of dollars and boost their employee productivity and security awareness by leveraging our cybersecurity and compliance services. Why don't we schedule a meeting where I can have whatever your salesperson's name is stop by so they can share with you some of the case studies and benefits that our customers in your industry have received by partnering with an organization and allowing us to handle their cybersecurity and compliance requirements for them. Or again, just like what the gatekeeper said, they may say to you, can you just send me over some information? So again, kind of addressed it in the first half and trying to get past the gatekeeper. You might think this is a good sign, but again, what this objection really means is they're just trying to tell you that they're not interested. I don't want to give you my attention and my time. But this is just kind of the more polite way, just saying, can you send me over some information? So the best way to respond to this objection is to start off by saying, absolutely, I can. I can send over some information, but we have found it's more useful when it's targeted to an organization's specific needs. So why don't I have salesperson stop by tomorrow? They'll bring, all sorts of literature with them around how we support the security needs of our clients, and then they can use that time to learn more about your organization and what your security and compliance requirements are, so they can leave you with the most appropriate and beneficial pieces. And then if the prospect says no to that meeting request, then use this as an opportunity to get their email address, because again, we can incorporate that into our email marketing database for future email marketing activities. And but do see if you can keep the momentum of the request to your advantage and use it to redirect it to continue moving the conversation forward. If they've given you your email, their email address, then this is again where you can say, look, I have a ton of information that I can send your way. I don't want to clog up your inbox. Just to make sure that I send over the most relevant pieces, can you tell me specifically what you were interested in? And I can send that over. Were you interested in X or Y? And although this is kind of a tiny little follow-up question, most prospects will take the time to answer it. It's a little question, but it will really cause them to lower their guard, because in this instance, they've given you a little bit of information. They've invested a little bit more time with you, being engaged in the conversation. And so they're starting to stick around. So if you can get a sense that you have turned this call around and it appears to be going well, then you can ask them a few more questions. But if you get cut off, don't worry about it. Thank them for their time. Tell them that you're going to send over that information momentarily. But again, make sure you do ask, would it be okay if I kind of called back in a week or so just to see if you had a chance to review the material that I sent over? I can use it to answer any questions and see if it might make sense at that time to set up a meeting with whoever your salesperson is. So moral of the story, not every call is going to lead to immediate appointment for you, but I think you can still claim success if you can gather as much data as you can from any prospect that you're able to connect with, because you always want to do what you can to build your case. And so because of that little follow-up question you asked, you now know a little bit more about their business, they know a little bit more about your business, and you've both determined that there might be some real potential for business possibly down the line. So now you'll be able to send over relevant information to them. Hopefully they'll study it a little bit more attentively, and then hopefully it'll open up the opportunity to schedule a meeting sometime in the near future. Or another way to address this kind of goes back to leveraging the silence approach again with the prospect and kind of throwing the ball back in their court, because either the prospect is going to feel rude at the end of the call, or they're going to give you some valuable information. And again, comes from the conversation I had last week with a business development director. Again, another tactic that he trains his team to use, as almost every call that their SDR does end with, can you just send me over some information? And his SDRs have been directed to answer the objection in this way. They say, yes, I can send over some information, but I need to ask you, are you asking for this information because you actually are curious about our services, or are you just politely trying to get me off the phone? And then he tells his SDRs to pause and remain silent and wait for that prospect to answer. And then eventually the prospect will probably laugh or say or chuckle, honestly, I'm just really not that interested. And then he instructs his SDRs to follow up with, why not? In an attempt to keep the conversation going and keep the prospect on the phone. It's actually one of his interview questions. When he interviews potential SDR candidates, he will ask them, how many times do you need to be told no before you hang up? And this is a trick question in his mind, because in his mind, the answer is you never hang up if the prospect is on the phone, because his feeling is if they are on the phone with you, they're still on for a reason. There's an underlying need that they just haven't told you about yet. So you need to keep asking open-ended questions, thoughtful questions, to kind of keep the conversation going to unearth whatever their real concerns are. The only time the phone call should end is when the prospect ends it. And then if you are presented with an objection and you really aren't sure how to respond back and how to address it, again, keep the conversation going with the prospect, by asking those open-ended questions like who, what, where, when, how, or a question that starts with, would you mind describing, or would you mind telling me more about, or could you help me to understand? If, for example, they give you an objection like we aren't interested, then you can respond back with, all right, I see A, B, and C are taking place in your industry. How is your organization being impacted by that? Or, interesting, several of our clients in whatever vertical are struggling with X, Y, and Z. How is your company dealing with that? Or, really, our clients are looking to us to help them improve whatever business challenge for their organization. What specific areas in your business are you looking to improve? This will hopefully get the prospect talking, which will hopefully open up an opportunity for you to say, you know what, it sounds like there could be a lot more to talk about. Maybe it would be helpful to have you meet or have someone stop by your office to learn more about your business, determine if there is some way that we might be able to help, and then use the conversation as the very reason why you should set up that meeting. But again, just as I mentioned before, if the prospect starts asking you questions, don't get drawn further into that conversation by answering all of them for them. The goal of the call is to always position that face-to-face appointment and use that on-site meeting to answer their questions. I would just avoid asking why type questions. If you ask someone why, even though I just said, why not, it can sound a little bit aggressive, especially at the beginning when you're trying to build a relationship, and because no one really likes being challenged. But sometimes a no is just a no. Your prospect could be throwing a lot of objections to get you off the phone. You don't want the call to turn into an argument between your SDR and your prospect. So encourage them to end the conversation with a polite thank you for taking the call, and suggest that you might try again in a few months just to check in case anything at their end or their industry might have changed that might warrant a conversation. So just agree to keep in touch. So the final component that I wanted to include in today's bootcamp centered around the whole employee management end of things, things to improve your chances that you can retain the person that is hired. So one of the biggest challenges that I hear when the topic of cold calling is brought up is, how should I be compensating someone that's going to be doing our cold calling? You want to pay attention, you want to pay them so they're motivated to do the job well, and makes them want to continue working at your MSP, which is going to maximize the productivity and the efficiency for your organization. So a few things to consider when you're building out your compensation plan. First, you do need to clearly outline the roles and the responsibilities of your appointment setter. It might sound obvious, but you need to make sure that they understand that their days will be spent sourcing and qualifying leads that map to your ideal client profile, making outbound calls to those potential leads, scheduling appointments for outside sales representatives, and then following up on leads that have been generated through your MSP's marketing efforts. You need to determine what their salary structure is going to look like. A couple of different options that I've seen MSPs use to compensate their cold caller, but many involve paying a base salary and then creating a variable commission structure based on the key activities that are important to the MSP. The mix is typically, 65% base salary, 35% commission. So as an example, if you have an average on-target earnings of around 80,000, this works out to be 52,000 as a base salary with the ability to earn an additional 28,000 in variable commissions. And this equates to about the national average in the US. And then you need to establish some key performance indicators that your appointment will be measured by. A lot of it is around like number of call made, number of appointments scheduled, quality of the appointments. Did the appointment actually take place? Then design the incentive structure, being sure to design in a way that rewards high performance because we want to reinforce those activities. So looking at some examples that can impact the variable earnings component, we have seen partners comp for each appointment that was booked and then vary that rate based on the quality of the appointment that was set, meaning that if the appointment was booked with kind of a lower level manager, they would get $25 per appointment. But if the appointment was booked with like a CEO or a CTO or a business owner, then we've seen MSPs pay upwards of $200 for that appointment. We have seen partners provide a show bonus if 75 or 80% of the appointments that the SDR has booked actually took place in a given month. We have seen MSPs pay a monthly or quarterly bonus based on achieving like a target, like they've met a certain number of appointments in a scheduled period of time, or so many of their appointments have led to a successful sale, so something like a closed deal bonus. So if the appointment that they booked end up becoming a signed closed deal in the end, we've seen MSPs pay anywhere from $50 to $200 based on the value of the contract, or something like 0.5% of the closed monthly MRR. They would get this as a bonus. And I think implementing a closed deal bonus as part of your commission structure works really well because it ensures that you're rewarding the right types of behaviors. You're basically rewarding your cold caller for connecting with prospects and booking appointments that align to your ideal client profile. You want your SDR to set your account executive up for success by having them book appointments with qualified prospects. And then if that good qualified lead works out and ends up turning into a closed deal, you want to provide a bonus to reward that activity. You really do want to avoid commission-only compensation structures, and I say this for a couple of reasons. You're going to very quickly demotivate your cold caller because it can take weeks, months to get wrapped up, and before commissions can begin materializing. And your SDR will likely quit on you if they feel that they're not getting paid quickly enough. And with the commission-only structure, what you're in effect doing is you're putting the entire sales process and that whole closing responsibility on the shoulders of the cold caller. You basically have them conducting 100% of the sales process from prospecting to closing, all in that one brief call. And it's just too much responsibility for one commission-only salesperson to be taking on. So the most effective sales teams do split the prospecting and the closing responsibilities between two people. We have the cold caller. They're only tasked with making the call, booking the appointment, and then you have the account executive that then takes over once that appointment has been made. And then they are the ones that are responsible for leading the prospect through the remainder of the sales funnel, where they hopefully become a closed signed deal in the end. Also be sure to include some non-monetary incentives as well. Don't discount what implementing recognition programs, team building activities, company events, professional development opportunities can do to keep your SDR engaged and motivated so that they want to continue working at your MSP. And then make sure that you're setting up a regular cadence for regular scheduled meetings to review their KPIs, provide them feedback, give them that coaching, and if they happen to be off, they need that feedback, they need that coaching. Regular communication is imperative. And then make sure you are periodically reviewing the compensation plan to make sure that it aligns with your business goals and that your objectives and to market conditions. And don't be afraid to adjust the plan as needed to deal with any challenges or to keep it competitive. Because again, it takes a lot of time and money and energy to ramp up a quality SDR. So you don't want to see that investment walk out the door and go to another MSP because you failed to pay them a competitive wage. So before we get into the nitty-gritty of just different performance metrics and activity trackers, you are going to want to first develop a set of milestones. And these will need to be communicated to your SDR so they understand what the expectations are that are being placed on them. Because this is how you're going to be able to map their development and see their progression.
They're generally broken down into month 1 milestones, month 2 and month 3 milestones. And by setting out these milestones, it's going to really help you come to a conclusion of whether do you keep that SDR that you have because they're meeting their milestones, or maybe you might have to let them go because they're not really getting it. So looking at some different milestones that you can put in place, like milestone 1, the SDR should have a very high level understanding around what services your MSP offers and what it is that you do. They should have a basic understanding of the industry, why MSPs exist, what are the benefits that they provide, and what the term managed services or MSP actually means. Milestone number 2, this is where the SDR has to have their first sales qualified lead, meaning they've booked their first meeting for the AE. And then by the end of month 2, they have to be off script, meaning that they've developed the confidence in their talk tracks. They've developed their own approach. Their questioning and objection handling techniques have all been kind of internalized, that they no longer need to work from a script. They've become adaptable based on how the call is going. And so they've moved from a script to being able to have real-time, thoughtful conversations. And then milestone number 3, they need to have some more SQLs booked. So in this case, they need to have 3 more SQLs booked, 3 more meetings for the AE. And again, these are going to be different based on your KPIs that we're going to be reviewing momentarily. But the idea behind these milestones are, you want the SDR to understand that just making 100 calls a day, because maybe that's one of the KPIs that you're measuring, that's not what's truly important. You're not paying them to make calls. You're paying them to generate opportunities and leads for your MSP. That's really the goal. So if you don't map out what your milestones are, especially your SQL milestones in month 2 and month 3, the SDR might just assume that they're doing a great job because they're making their 100 dials a day, because that's what their KPI tells them to do. So again, just examples. Main point here is it is important to have defined check-ins, because you can't make the assumptions that your SDR is going to instinctively know what they need to do in the beginning, and you as their manager need to be aware as how they're progressing. So setting up these types of milestones, it's going to be beneficial to see how your SDR is tracking. And if they're not tracking, if they're not meeting these milestones, then you can decide, do I want to keep investing in this person because you feel they are a quality person? Or maybe you just understand, well, they're not hitting these milestones. They're just not getting it. So maybe this is the time to maybe let them go. So then moving on and looking at KPIs, so key performance indicators, looking at a little bit more detail, because if we can't measure it, we can't manage it. So in addition to setting milestones and expectations, we also want to ensure that we're creating some sort of reporting mechanism for your SDR so they can track their activities and so you can see how well they are progressing. And this tracking, again, it is important because if they're not hitting their numbers, you want to be able to review their activities and provide that coaching during your regular meetings so you can offer possible tweaks in their call process. So if you're just starting out, make it easy. Just use an Excel spreadsheet so they can self-report. And then you can use this tracking spreadsheet with them either on a daily basis or maybe on a weekly basis. And to determine what your activity structure should look like for your SDR, you really need to reverse engineer your sales goals, meaning that, how much new MRR clients do you wish to bring on each and every month? Is that $1,000, $2,000, $5,000 a month in new MRR contacts? So looking at the activities and the metrics that you should be tracking, obviously how many dials are need to be made each day, each week, over the course of the month. How many dials are going to be made to unique prospects that your SDR is going to be calling into, for the very first time, versus the number of dials that are going to be continued to be making to existing contacts that are already on your call list. How many live connections are needed to the actual decision maker each day, each week over the course of the month. And if they're not able to reach the decision maker when they called, why not? Did they have to leave a voicemail? Did no one pick up? You want to be tracking all of this because it's going to be really good coaching opportunities for your daily or your weekly one-on-ones. And then how many appointments with the key decision makers need to be booked each month to reach your MRR sales targets? And if they're not able to book an appointment with the key decision maker, why was that? Were they being blocked? Or did they manage to get through, but then just got a flat out no, or not interested when they were connected with the decision maker? And if they got that no, what kind of objections were they given? Again, really good information to be collecting so that you can review it during your coaching session, because maybe scripts need to change, maybe new responses need to be created. And then what's the show ratio needed versus what is actually happening? Meaning what percentage of scheduled meetings are being booked are actually taking place. And if there's no shows, what happened? What follow-up work is being done to try and get that meeting rebooked? And then how many meetings does it take to typically land that new client? So what is your desired close ratio? And then again, just make sure that all of these notes get put into your CRM, into whatever tracking system that you're going to use, because you really do want to get into the habit of enforcing that. If it's not in the CRM, it's almost like it didn't happen. So to illustrate how this flow might work for you, you may obviously want to tailor this depending on whatever your own situation is and what your own MRR growth targets are. But you'll see that I've added a screenshot from the Building Your Pipeline calculator. And you can find this as a downloadable link, as a handout, if you think that this will be something that would be useful. But going through this, say that you want $4,000 a month in new MRR, and say your average contract value is $2,000 a contract. So to reach this $4,000 monthly MRR goal, the SDR is going to need to make, and we are going to assume 20 work days in a month, $75 a day, which equals $375 a week, which equals $1,500 over the course of the month. They will need to achieve a minimum 20% daily contact rate, meaning that they will need to connect with a minimum of 15 decision makers a day, which equals 75 contacts a week. They also will need to achieve a minimum 5% appointment agreement rate, which means that they're going to need to book 0.75 appointments a day, which equals to 3.75 appointments per week, which means 15 appointments per month for either you or whoever else is doing that call. And then hoping that you have a minimum 70% show rate, meaning that at least 11 face-to-face meetings are happening every month. And then assuming that whoever's the salesperson has a 20% close rate for that, that should net you your $4,000 a month and new MRR if your average deal size is $2,000. And so that should get you then 2 new managed services clients a month. Okay. And again, as I keep reiterating, to set your telemarketer up for success, it is imperative that you schedule at a minimum weekly one-on-ones with your appointment setter to review the process, the progress, review the results, provide coaching if necessary, if targets are not being met. So again, items you want to review, all those KPIs, are they on track? Are they on target? If they are off target, if they're behind on their targets, why is that? What's preventing them from reaching their targets? Is the, in other words, their 20% key decision maker contact rate, their 5% appointment agreement rate, maintaining that 70% show rate. If they're off, why is that? As an example, if the show ratio is low, what happens after they make that appointment for the outside account executive? What work is being done to ensure that meetings are taking place as scheduled? So what does that ongoing interaction look like between the prospect beforehand? Is the SDR sending out reminder emails, calling them up again to remind them that the call is happening, to ensure that the prospect does attend that meeting with that outside account executive. And if possible, it is a good idea if you can record their calls, to review their calls and see how their calls are being handled. If you don't have the software in place to record calls, then just make plans to kind of listen in on calls periodically as a way of spot checking. And then listen to the type of objections that are being given. How are they being handled? Are there any common problems or concerns that need to be addressed in their delivery approach? Are they having any issues getting past the gatekeeper? Does the decision maker keep saying they're too busy, they're not interested, and then are trying to get themselves off the phone as quickly as possible? So if they're doing that, do we need to make tweaks to the scripts then? Do we need to tighten up the sales pitch? Do we need to tighten up the value prop? Do we just need a whole new approach in how the telemarketer is engaging and working with prospects? So again, it is a good idea, have a couple of different scripts. That's why role playing comes into play, to test out to see which versions are the most effective in creating and maintaining that engagement. And then if your appointment setter or your SDR is off track, are they being pulled away from the phones? Are they being dragged into other office tasks that are taking them away from their cold calling duties? It is critical that your appointment setter remains kind of 100% focused on their outbound calling activities. It can be very easy to have this person kind of slide into doing more menial office jobs that no one else wants to do because they're the new person and they're the most junior on staff. So you want to resist this tendency and remain disciplined about keeping them on the phones. And so generating success with your cold calling, it is ultimately going to come down to your commitment and the consistency that you give to it and embedding it as part of your corporate culture. All right, so looking at some next steps, I know there's a lot of information that was delivered in today's boot camp. Feel free to retake this boot camp on demand. If there are any parts that you want to go back and listen to or share with your team, or if you do hire that SDR, have them listen to me go through the different objection sections, or also listen to part 1, developing your marketing strategy if you missed it. Make sure if you don't have it yet that you have defined your ideal client profile, start using it to build your leads lists, set up those Google alerts, use those filters on LinkedIn, develop your MRR and your activity goals, your milestones for your SDR, work on your scripting, your objection management technique, and then make sure to register for my next series of boot camps. That's all on the MSP sales process. And as always, if you have any questions, reach out to me, LinkedIn, email, contact with your PSM, register for my next round of office hours. I'd be happy to help. All right, so thank you very much to everyone for taking the time for listening to me today. Absolutely appreciate it. Again, my contact information is there on the screen. Never hesitate to reach out. Enjoy the rest of the day, rest of the week. Take care.